Can the Green Bay Packers become a tier 1 team in the NFC? We're going to talk about that and more tier rankings on a Tuesday edition of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to a Tuesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tyler Rowland, local expert for Locked On Titans, here with Lauren Cox, local expert for Locked On Bears. We're going to be doing some NFL tier rankings with you guys today. Before we jump into it, though, do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Also, thanks for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Remember, it's year-round, Monday through Friday, free NFL content here on the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Lauren, I'm excited for today's show. We're going to be doing some tier rankings. We're going to do the NFC first, do the AFC second, talk about teams that can make a big jump in which tier that they're in during the 2024 season. We're going to start in the NFC. And Lauren, like I said, I'm going to lead us off here. Tier 1, I have the San Francisco 49ers and the Detroit Lions. Stop. Those are the only two teams that I have in tier 1. What does your tier 1 look like for the NFC?
Yeah, we're step for step in that one. Like, I think those two teams are the two, like, proven. I'm sure that they're good, and I know exactly what we're going to get out of them. And everyone else, like, there are other teams that can get to that point, but everyone else, and especially I think like this next tier that we'll get to after this, is like teams that I think should be pretty good, but like I just really am going to want to see it for sure before they enter this category with the 49ers and the Lions.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, and it's for different reasons. So for tier 2, for me, I have Green Bay, I have the Philadelphia Eagles, and I have the Los Angeles Rams. And you talk about proving it. I want Green Bay to prove that they're as good as they looked in the playoffs. But for Philly, I want them to prove that last year was a fluke. So they're both in that tier for me because I believe in the talent on the team, but proving it for different reasons. And the Rams, I know that's a bit of a controversial one maybe, but I am just so high on what the Rams have done in this offseason. I'm high on Matthew Stafford. I think he's an underrated quarterback still, even after winning a Super Bowl. I think the Rams are going to have a really, really good season. So I may be projecting a bit there, but that's my tier 2.
Rams were one of those teams that was right on this line for me of like, do they make it to this tier or are they another tier down? I didn't put them into this tier just yet because when you lose Aaron Donald, I know like the offense is going to be very good. They've got great receivers, obviously, and without Cooper Kupp last year, that certainly limited what some of the damage they could do. But can two rookie defensive linemen come in and replace Aaron Donald plus some of the other younger guys? They got like I think it's going to be. I need a little bit more like before I can put them up to this tier, but this is another one of these teams that I could easily see moving their way up. I noticed you didn't have Dallas in this tier after going 12-5 last year. So my tier 2 was the same, except instead of the Rams, I had the Cowboys, but I would Eagles, Packers, Cowboys, and then I have the Rams coming up in the next year. But why doesn't Dallas crack this high for you?
I guess I'll tell you, I just don't trust them. And I don't think that they made a lot of notable additions this year to get better. So it's good that they were 12-5 last year, but I don't think they've done enough to take that next step when other teams are getting better too. I don't think Philadelphia will be as bad. I think Washington could be a little bit improved, just not bottom of the barrel. I still don't think that they're going to be one of the better teams, but they could be a little better with Jaden Daniels. I guess I just don't trust Dallas to keep up the consistency year to year. They're kind of a wave there.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't think they're going to necessarily be this 12-5 team that's pushing kind of up high in the playoff standings. I mean, they were the 2 seed last year, won their division. I think having a team like Philadelphia right here in this same tier speaks to how much more difficult that road is going to be. But I still think like given having Mike Zimmer come over and take over that defense, like I'm excited to see if that can kind of keep things going. I mean, having that kind of blitz capacity with guys like Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence on the edge on top of everyone else being aggressive and then letting the secondary be aggressive on the back end. Like, sure, like I've got questions about different areas in this offense, and certainly Dak Prescott kind of rides the waves quite a bit, but like I'm still willing to kind of give them up here. But I think Cowboys and Rams, I think we're both kind of like neck and neck on this tier line. I think I put Dallas as a little bit higher and you put Los Angeles
Right.
lower, but I think it's not hard to make a strong argument in either direction.
What's funny is I have Dallas in tier 3 by themselves
Oh,
because I don't think that they're on the level of the 3 that I mentioned, Green Bay, Philly, and LA, who I like a lot this year, and I like better than Dallas. But Dallas is a step above the other tier 4 option. So my tier 4 is Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Seattle, and Chicago. I'm high on your local Bears there. I think they're going to be pretty good this year, or at least decent, So I think Dallas is better than all those teams. I don't want to lump them in there, but I just can't believe in Dallas enough to put them in the Green Bay, Philly, and Los Angeles Rams tier. So where are you at with your tier 3 and tier 4 off that?
yeah, no, I think we're in a similar boat there. Like I had this next, I Dallas up in the higher tier, but then I put the Rams down with those other 4 teams. Was that third tier for me, where it's
okay,
yeah. The Rams are the best of those teams, and I would have considered putting the Rams in their own tier, kind of like you did with Dallas.
Right.
Like I do think the Rams are better than the Bears, Buccaneers, Falcons, and Seahawks right now. But I can see a scenario where any of those teams gets the right momentum rolling and can be up, not necessarily like a top tier team, but move up and maybe give the Rams run for their money. Like all these teams feel like maybe they're not necessarily going to win their division, but that they could get hot and make some noise as one of the better wild card teams going into this year. And like any combination of like, oh, Kirk Cousins and the Falcons clicks perfectly, or Geno and the Seahawks, rediscover some stuff with Mike McDonald, or, Baker Mayfield stays hot, or any of these kind of things.
Caleb Williams is the man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that one is a little bit a little bit easier for me. Like any of these teams could kind of go there, and that's certainly what also separates them from some of the teams a little bit farther below them in this tier, where it's like, or the next tier down, where it's like, okay,
right,
the rest of these teams are a little bit more of a long shot from varying degrees.
Yeah, that seems completely fair. And I mean, obviously, we're getting into these tiers where teams have significant flaws. But my last 2 tiers, so you have 5 tiers, I have 6, but I have Dallas as 1 tier. So, want to put that whatever. But I think we both have 5 or 6 teams left. And for me, there's Minnesota, New Orleans, and Arizona. And then there's a gap. And then below that, I have Washington, Carolina, and the New York Giants. So how does your final 6 play out compared to that?
Yeah, I definitely struggled with like where to put, like after Vikings and Saints, like whether or not to get the Cardinals in there and how much faith I have. Something about the way that organization is running, the way that, like, I liked a lot what they did this offseason, like in the draft, especially, but like, it feels like it's going to take time for that to really come to fruition. We expect, like, man, they hit all these great picks, but like young players take time to develop. So like Arizona was the last team here where I was like, do I put them with the Vikings and the Saints, or do I put them down with the Commanders, Giants, and Panthers? And while I think the Cardinals are clearly better than the Commanders, Giants, and Panthers, I do think there's still a big enough gap between the Cardinals and then like the Vikings and the Saints that I have just the Vikings and Saints together there as like their own kind of little tier. And then the other 4 teams all further below them, not because I think the Panthers and the Cardinals are exactly as bad, but you could separate them into a bunch of different tiers if we really want to get the minutia there. But I think I think the Cardinals are a little bit closer to the Panthers than they are to the Vikings and the Saints.
I think that's fair. I think what did it for me is Kyler Murray. I just looked at the other 3 quarterbacks for Washington, Carolina, and the Giants, and I don't trust them the way that I trust a healthy Kyler Murray. I think he can be a difference maker to get them in that next tier. What's funny is Minnesota was a team that I almost put into tier 4 up with Atlanta, Seattle, Chicago, because Minnesota has good coaching, good weapons. The defense could be good, but I just don't trust the quarterback situation at the end of the day. But with that being said, that was fun. I enjoyed that. So AFC is bound to be a great time too. Before we dive into the AFC though, do want to let you guys know. Well, I'm sorry about that, Lauren. Did want to let you guys know that today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by BetterHelp. So life is hard. And it's even harder when you're trying to compare yourself to all these different people and everything you see online, because comparison is the thief of joy at the end of the day. And therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have. So you could start living your best life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, you have to give BetterHelp a try. I worked with BetterHelp when I was moving. Very stressful time, as anybody who's ever moved truly knows. And it was definitely a good experience for me. It's entirely online. designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire and you're going to get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Lauren, we will continue this Tuesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We're doing tiers, did NFC tiers, and just talking about our different arrangements, man. Just great conversation about these teams that we're not certain about. Could they jump up? We're going to talk about which teams we think take the biggest jumps in these tiers by the end of 2024, but we're going to dive into the AFC now. Lauren, I'm going to let you take the way. I have a feeling that tier 1 in the AFC is a lonely mountaintop.
I'm still willing to put the Chiefs and the Ravens together up there. I think both of those teams have enough juice that, like, I think every year we end up having questions about the Chiefs, right? And then we end up at the end they end up being great. And I still think Baltimore is dangerous every time Lamar Jackson steps on the field. They've been able to sort of structure that offensive line slowly. Like over the last couple of years, they've gotten better and better there. I know there's still weapons questions about what you've got around Lamar Jackson there, but as long as you've got Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely at tight end and Derrick Henry in the backfield, I think that offense is always going to be dangerous enough. And there's still plenty of pieces on that defense, even after losing Mike McDonald. They still need to prove to me that they're not great before I'm willing to take them off, even though I can certainly see a scenario where they take a step back this year and that things aren't as good. Certainly I don't think they'll be as number 1 overall seed, 13-4 record. No, I think they'll be a little bit lower down. But if I'm thinking teams I trust in the AFC to go on a long playoff run, maybe they only win 10 or 11 games instead of 13, but get into the postseason, I think Lamar can get them back to the AFC Championship game without, I don't really question whether or not they're going to be good enough to at least be in that conversation all year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% on that. And Baltimore was a tough team because I almost put them on their own tier individually because I didn't feel like lumping them in with some second tier teams. But I'll be honest, I can't put them on the level with Kansas City. So I agree with everything that you're saying about Baltimore, but it's still Kansas City, and then there's got to be a gap. That's just how I view it. So I went with Kansas City number 1, but in tier 2, there's a big group of teams, I guess, for me that I trust: Buffalo, Houston, Cincinnati, and then Baltimore is at the top of that pack for sure. But I had trouble with Baltimore, whether they should be on their own tier or whether they're in that group of Buffalo, Houston, Cincinnati. Do you have all those teams together?
Yeah, I struggled with maybe even moving Houston up into a higher category. Given everything they did this offseason, with Stephon Diggs, so they had a couple pieces on their defense too. Off the top of my head, Danielle Hunter. That's the
Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry. They stole 2 guys from the Titans, so I know that very well. Yeah.
That offensive line remains strong. There's a lot of great pieces there, and given how good they were even in year 1 of Stroud, it's oh man, that team feels primed to be in the next category. But I also still do want them to prove it. We've seen many teams have great off seasons where it's oh, look at all the players they added, and then it doesn't always work exactly the way you thought it would, or it looks like it would on paper. So that's what keeps it. It's for me, it's Texans, Dolphins, Bills, Bengals here in this group, where it's any of these teams I think can be very, very good. And I wouldn't be surprised if any of the 4 of them were in the AFC Championship game. Obviously you got to get past the Chiefs or the Ravens somewhere to get there, but sure, no one would be sitting here in January going, wow, I can't believe the Dolphins are here. No, all 4 of those teams are right in that category, but none of them are quite as I 100% trust that they're for sure going to be as great as the Chiefs are. I think the Ravens in that regard, where it's most likely they will, but let's really see it all played out and kind of take that next step this year.
That seems fair. And it's funny to me that Houston is kind of like the Green Bay of the AFC, where they have the young quarterback who just exploded on the scene. Obviously different timelines for those 2 quarterbacks, but it felt very similar in terms of, whoa, this team's way better than we expect. Young players, but some good veteran talent too. I'll tell you, I disagree on Miami. And the people who listen to me and Alex on Locked On NFL Thursday probably wouldn't be shocked to hear this. I'm not a believer in Miami, and I actually have Miami a tier lower than Buffalo, Houston, Cincinnati, Baltimore. You say, I would be shocked if we looked up and the Dolphins were in the AFC Championship game. That would shock me personally because I'm just not high on them. So I actually have Miami in tier 3 all by themselves, kind of like I do Dallas, where yes, I see the talent. yes, I understand that, why these teams are expected to be good, but I just can't personally believe in them. So I have to put them a tier lower. So it's funny that Houston is kind of like the Green Bay of the NFC, and then Miami is like my Dallas,
Is that about not trusting Tua to stay healthy, or is it like losses on their defense? Like where's the big concern for Miami for you?
Well, one, I do think that there have been losses on the defense. There's also Teron Armstead's a year older. They lose Robert Hunt. They lose Connor Williams on the offensive line. I personally am not a huge believer in Tua. I think he's a game manager, not a game changer, to use Cam Newton's excellent terminology there. I think that he gets more hype in the media than what his play deserves in the playoffs. Like, I just don't think he's a playoff performer. I think because of the system and the scheme and the well-oiled machine that they have in Miami, he's going to put up good numbers in the regular season. But when we get to the playoffs and things, the screws tighten, I just don't think Tua is a guy that you can count on and rely on. I think he's a product of his system more than people, I guess, think based on his regular season performance, So I just don't believe in Tua as a primetime playoff performer. And then with some of the issues with the roster that I think they've lost, that leads to my lack of faith in Miami. So they're in tier 3 by themselves.
Because I could easily see someone having some, like, not the same questions, but like saying, well, I'm confident in Miami, but like, I don't trust that Joe Burrow is 100% healthy and that the Bengals will be able to be as good. Or I don't trust that the Bills are good enough around Josh Allen anymore, that the receiving talent there and everything is sort of slowly depreciated on him. That those are both teams where I was like, I wasn't going to bring them a whole tier down. I almost separated them into another middle tier, because they, like, the question marks for me on those teams are a little bit bigger personally than the question marks on Miami, but I certainly don't see Miami as like a sure
I've seen Burrow and Josh Allen ball out in the playoffs. Like, I've seen it. They've done it, and they didn't win Super Bowls, and Patrick Mahomes is still the king, but I've seen Joe Burrow take his team to the Super Bowl with crazy throws and great plays and clutch moments. Josh Allen, I know that he always loses to Patrick Mahomes, but I've seen him make clutch plays and save his team in the playoffs. I haven't seen that from Tua. So I'm kind of a, you got to show me, guys, is basically how you're not wrong, but in my brain, how that plays out is, who have I seen do it? I believe in them more,
Well, you've seen Aaron Rodgers do it, and the Jets are not in this tier, despite having a pretty darn good team around Aaron. Are they at the top of your next lower tier?
No. I actually have them a tier below. My tier 4 is Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and the Chargers, because I believe in the changes that Jim Harbaugh is going to make with the Chargers. So I give them a little bump, but I almost had Cleveland and Pittsburgh by themselves in a tier, because all the teams after that, Aaron Rodgers is too old. He's not in his prime like Burrow and Allen and even Tua, so that is you're right, but he's in his 40s, so I can't give him that sort of prime credit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I struggled with both Cleveland and Pittsburgh, where it's like,
right.
I want to trust the Steelers, but like, and I know but like, I didn't trust Kenny Pickett, and I don't necessarily trust Russell Wilson or Justin Fields either. So like, I just made this one big tier of like teams that I think could be exciting, but I don't fully trust. It's it's the Steelers, it's the Browns, it's the Jets, it's the Chargers, it's the Jaguars, and it's the Colts, where it's like any of those teams could get hot and kind of go on a run and have a surprise good season. But like, I don't fully trust any of them to be consistently great across the course of the season, but like one or two of them probably will. I mean, we're talking playoff teams, like at least one of them has to make the playoffs here, because we only have 6 teams ahead of them on the rankings here. And probably maybe one or two of them will go on a decent run here and end up winning double-digit games. And you're like, wow, what a great year for the Chargers or the Jets or whatever. But like, I need to see them actually do it before I can say, well, on paper, the Chargers look better. On paper, the Jets look better. On paper, I trust the Jaguars, but let's see it first.
Yeah, it was tough for me once we got past Miami with the teams like you're talking, the big group. But I did go Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and the Chargers a step ahead. I think the Chargers having the Raiders and the Broncos in their division helps them there. But after that, I have Indy, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Las Vegas, and the Jets all in a tier together. Like, I maybe call it AFC South bias or whatever you want, but like, I just don't believe that Anthony Richardson could stay healthy for a whole season. And without him, I don't think the Colts are as special, and they're just, in it. Jacksonville, same thing. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? Did they learn from their mistakes? I don't really know. The Jets, they have a good roster. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy, they could be good. Vegas, they made that run last year. They have talent on that team. What's it going to be? I think Tennessee, obviously the team I cover, has added a bunch of pieces. There's a lot more talent on that roster. And other than Houston, the AFC South could just be, a complete wash with all those teams beating each other. So really, to me, New England and Denver are at the bottom. They're in my tier 6. And then the teams after them, it's just tough to sort them out of who's going to be what.
Yeah, I know we got to move on here, but I found myself with like a slight gap between like all those. Like I put the Raiders and Titans. I feel like there's a gap between like the teams above them and then the teams below them. Like I ended up kind of combining them with the Patriots and Broncos, but I do think like as we talk through it, like the Raiders and Titans are definitely like a step above the Patriots and Broncos.
A baby step. Yeah.
But like I don't quite trust them enough to put them in the same level as the Chargers, Colts, Browns, Steelers kind of teams that we were talking about. Like they kind of exist in their own little area where like they're scrappy, but I don't like, I want to see more like name talent that I can like know will be consistently good over the course of the season, but like they're getting there.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, which teams could jump tiers from our expectations, whether going down, whether going up? We're going to talk about that next.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. And FanDuel Sportsbook is here for you all summer long because even though, the NBA and NHL playoffs are over and we're still, a month away from any kind of preseason action happening here, doesn't mean that the fun stops at FanDuel because all summer long you can keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. Whether you want to bet ahead on the football season, already plenty of odds for week 1. You can bet on Coach of the Year, MVP, futures, et cetera, et cetera. There's always football bets to be made. But then, baseball season, soccer tournaments going on right now between tennis, golf. They got all the sports on FanDuel. And to keep it exciting, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Lauren, I got to tell you, speaking of FanDuel Sportsbook, the Titans are getting 4.5 points on the road in Chicago in week 1. And I don't know who's going to win that game, but that's a lot of points. I'm just saying, I think that's going to be a very, very close game, like a weird week 1, 2-point game, something like that. I don't know. Just throwing that out there for the FanDuel folks. If you're interested in some NFL futures, it's something I'm looking at.
It feels to me like a lot of Caleb Williams hype. Moving the line that direction more and more and more, which we'll get into because those are both teams that could potentially change tiers here over the course of the season, depending on how things play out.
100%. I think you're right about that. So I'll kick us off here. I think a team that could jump up in a big tier is Atlanta. If Kirk Cousins so I had Atlanta in tier 4 in the NFC as, outside of the top 7 teams, okay, or top 6 teams. Atlanta could be a team with all the talent they have on offense. If the defense hits right, I mean, Raheem Morris is a defensive guy. I know he's a well-rounded coach. He's done a lot, but Atlanta has the talent on their team that if Kirk Cousins stays healthy and plays high-level Kirk Cousins football, because Kirk Cousins is underrated generally by just the perception of him. I think Atlanta could be a team that is like, as good as San Francisco and Detroit. Like they have good offensive line. They have great weapons. If the defense is in a good spot, Kirk Cousins plays good football. I think they have talent in Atlanta where by the end of the year, we could be looking at San Francisco, Detroit, and Atlanta. We're all 11 plus win teams and are, considered the class of the conference. Like I think that's obviously we're looking at things that are maybe a little less expected than normal. But I think that could be something that I don't think sounds unrealistic. If you tell me the Falcons won 12 games, and Kirk Cousins was good, that wouldn't blow my mind, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like we all got so caught up in scratching our heads about the Michael Penix draft pick.
Right.
Like, I think we all associate like Falcons now with like weird or bad decision making because first like Arthur Smith stuff and now the Penix decision where we think, oh, that's just not a well-run team. So that they must not be any good. But like, I think back to like the last couple seasons, we've kind of felt like, man, like coaching is one of the biggest things holding this team back, and quarterback play. And what did they address this offseason? Quarterback play and coaching. And maybe Raheem Morris isn't a Hall of Fame coach, but he should be an upgrade over Arthur Smith. Like, I really love Zach Robinson as an offensive coordinator. Like, I think he's a really smart guy. And you give him all the weapons that Arthur Smith wasn't able to properly maximize, or some of the weapons. I guess they've changed a little bit over, but like still a really, really talented offense with a bunch of nice pieces. Plus, like they've used a lot of their draft picks on defense after Michael Penix. Like they've got young talent, at least coming up there, that maybe it's not going to be like a perfectly fixed defense right away, but like they might be good enough here to help that offense get through and make a little bit of noise, and at least take a very winnable division that side of the NFC and start running with it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. It's definitely in the realm of possibility. One thing I would say the other way is Philadelphia could drop down a bunch of tiers. If things continue to spiral for them, look, I think they have too much talent, so I don't think it's going to happen. But if you're looking at teams, at least for me, I'm looking at the top of the NFC, those top 5 teams that I had in those tiers with San Francisco, Detroit, Green Bay, Philly, and the Rams. The Rams are an obvious one, but like you talked about, they're kind of on the line of being in there. Out of those top 4, I don't think Green Bay is going down anytime soon. Maybe Jordan Love turns back into a pumpkin or something like that. But Philly could be a team where A.J. Brown starts barking. The offensive line is getting older by the day. They added pieces on defense. Maybe they work, maybe they don't. Some of these Georgia guys, will they pan out completely? I think Philly could maybe take a step back and be like a tier 4 team, like in the Atlanta, Seattle, Chicago range that we had right now. Like we could be looking at them like that this year. And especially if Washington takes a step forward, the Giants get any better at all. Like it could get tougher for Philadelphia. We'll see what Dallas does too. Like you seem to believe in Dallas more than I did. Maybe Dallas is right. Maybe they keep rolling with some of the things that happen on the O-line and everything. Like I could just see Philadelphia taking a big step back based on what we saw from them at the end of the year last year.
Yeah, anytime you change out both coordinators and like not for winning a Super Bowl and having both coordinators hired away, but like, needing to make changes at the coordinator spot doesn't necessarily strike you as an organization or a franchise that's in a position to make a big leap forward. And yet the Chicago Bears had to change both coordinators this offseason. They're a very popular pick for a team that could take a big step forward. I tend to be trying to pump the brakes a little bit more on the Bears there. I think it's really easy to get excited about Caleb Williams and everything and say, oh man, this team's going to win 10, 11, 12, 13 games and push the Packers and the Lions for the top of the NFC North. I'm like, let's slow down a little bit here. Like less than 12 months ago, the fan base was calling for the head coach to be fired and to kind of clean house and change everything here. Like drafting Caleb Williams and the head coach, Matt Eberflus, grew out a beard and everyone is in love with him now. And like, I'm not here to say he's a terrible coach or anything, but like, not much has changed except for some of the players on the roster, and like the players on the roster weren't 100% of the issue in the past. So like, I'm still like trying to push a little bit like cautiously. Like I think where we have them is in a pretty good tier where I think they're a 8 or 9 or maybe 10 win team that pushes for a wild card spot. But like the Bears are not one of these teams that's going to make that big jump forward. I think they're going to be better than last year and be a more exciting team and heading in a positive direction, but not like make a big leap forward. Let me throw one at you though, from your division, because I think you may disagree with me on this one, but I think the Colts, not as a team that I think is going to be like a surefire like longevity play here, but like because Anthony Richardson only played 4 games last season, if he stays healthy, like the league still doesn't have tape on him, like because Anthony Richardson like only had 4 games of tape last season. Like year 2 in the league is when teams start to like have tape on you and you have to like adjust as a quarterback because they've kind of figured out what you can do. But like, I think Richardson still has enough of that element of surprise. It's not surprise, but like he can kind of get hot and take the league by storm, and the league doesn't quite know exactly how to stop him yet for this year. And the Colts have enough weapons, and I think their offensive line is getting better over time, and like still some veteran pieces on that defense where like he could kind of capture that spark for this year. And then I don't know if I believe in Anthony Richardson like over the next 5 to 10 years, but I think you can still kind of get that. It's not year 1, but it's kind of like year 1 spark of like, all right, like this is catching fire, and he's having that kind of big surprise season and then everyone adjusts, and then we'll see if he can keep up from there. But for this year, I think the Colts could make that maybe temporary leap, but leap nonetheless.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. If Anthony Richardson is the difference maker that people project that he could be, like, coming out of college, that is going to take a team last year that was good with Gardner Minshew and definitely make them great. So that could happen. It's just Anthony Richardson, the health. He's already throwing left-handed passes in practice, and then they're posting dunks of him saying he's fine, and it's all just a little bit murky. But you could definitely see why people believe in that team. I have a theory, though, that just like Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck, people have been able to rely on the Colts for so long. If you say the Colts are going to be good, they're probably not going to let you down. It just creates so much trust that now, even when there aren't valid reasons, like people were hyping up the Colts with Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz, and it's just, people believe in the Colts, and they always will because they've done it before. So I understand it, but as a Titans fan, it does get, a little home cooking here on Locked On NFL. It does get a little annoying to see the Colts love, but I get why, that. And like you're saying, you get 4 or 5 games of him. You didn't get to see teams are going to adjust, and then the Colts are going to be able to adjust and change things based on how teams start playing them. They never got through that phase of things, so that could definitely help Anthony Richardson still capitalize on that in year 2.
I think that Colts quarterback succession thing makes me think of Green Bay as well, where it's like we saw one pretty good year of Jordan Love, although he was not great at the beginning of the year. We saw half the season of great Jordan Love. They still don't have like a number 1 receiver, but people are claiming, I've heard people say, it's actually better that they don't have a number 1 receiver because then defenses can't key in on that one guy. They always have so many weapons. It's like, okay, but I do think they had a really good offseason. Green Bay will be good, but I feel some of that same kind of skepticism of well, okay, we saw it for a little while there, but there should still be some questions about that team. And not every young player is always just going to take a step forward and everyone's just going to be better and the whole team's going to be great. Let's see it. Probably, but let's see it first.
Right. Definitely got to see it. And we're going to see it. Football's right around the corner. Lauren, just think about this. Wide receiver by committee sounds like running back by wide receivers are getting more expensive. Maybe teams like the Chiefs, the Packers, now the Bills are like, hey, how about instead of having a high priced wide receiver, we just pay a bunch of $6-7 million guys and don't pay a big. Could wide receiver become the next running back? Me and Alex talked about that a little bit ago. A decade from now, who knows? But that's a different conversation for a different day. Thanks so much for coming on with us, Lauren. You'll get your regularly scheduled partnerships back next week. But that's going to do it for a Tuesday edition of Locked On NFL. I tell everybody every week to start their weekend early and stay safe out there. Tuesday may be a little early, but hey, 4th of July this week, it's a great time to start your weekend early, folks. Stay safe out there. And that'll do it for us here on Locked On NFL.